The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Park took her first step onto Station Horizon 7. The air smelled different here, a mix of recycled oxygen and something sweet she could not name. Lights of every color blinked from the walls. Creatures of all shapes and sizes moved through the wide corridors, speaking in languages her translator chip struggled to keep up with. She was 22 years old, born in, trained in Seoul, and now standing in a place no human had been welcomed in 15 years. The Galactic Integration Academy had finally opened its doors to her species again, and had fought hard to be the one to walk through them. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. It was old leather, brown and cracked in places, with a handle made of reinforced steel wrapped in worn fabric. Her grandmother had carried this bag for 40 years. Before she died, she had pressed it into his hands and said, "Take this wherever you go. I will be with you." Inside the bag was a journal filled with her grandmother's handwriting, training notes, combat techniques, life lessons written in ink that had faded but never disappeared. Her grandmother had been a national taekwondo champion, and she had trained since she was 4 years old. Walked through the arrivals area trying not to stare at the aliens around her. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had too many eyes or not enough limbs. She reminded herself that to them she was the strange one, a small, soft creature with only 2 arms and thin skin that bruised easily. A large display screen on the wall showed a welcome message in 12 languages. Human text was at the bottom in the smallest font. Noticed this but said nothing. She followed the signs toward the student housing area. The corridors grew narrower and the crowds thinned. She passed a group of tall creatures with blue skin and 4 arms each. They stood nearly 3 meters high, with hard shells covering their joints and backs. Their eyes, black and shiny like wet stones, followed her as she walked by. One of them made a sound, low and rumbling. The others laughed. Did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. She had heard it before, in schoolyards and training halls and everywhere humans gathered. The sound of someone who thought they were better than you. She kept walking. Her room was small, barely enough space for a bed, a desk, and a storage unit. The window looked out at the stars. Set her bag on the bed and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. A knock came at the door. She opened it to find a young man about her age, with short black hair and tired eyes. He was human. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He said. "I heard a new human was arriving today. I wanted to. I thought you should know some things." Stepped aside to let him in. He moved carefully, like someone used to making himself small. He sat on the edge of her desk chair, hands folded in his lap. "How long have you been here?" asked. 2 years, he paused. "I'm the only other human on the station. There used to be more, but they all left." "Why?" Looked at the floor. The big ones with 4 arms, they run things here. Not officially, but everyone knows it. Their species has been at the top for 300 years. They don't like newcomers, especially humans. Sat on her bed facing him. "What do they do?" "They don't hurt you, not physically. The Academy has rules against that." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They just make your life impossible. They delete your assignments. They spill things on your clothes. They break your belongings. They say things about you loud enough for everyone to hear, and nobody stops them. Nobody ever stops them." "The teachers." "Some of them are, the others are afraid." Finally looked up at her. "I'm telling you this because I wish someone had told me. Keep your head down. Don't react when they provoke you. Don't fight back. Just survive until you graduate and then get as far away from here as you can." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My grandmother used to tell me something. She said that a tree that bends in the wind will survive the storm. But she also said that some storms require you to become the wind yourself." Stared at her. "What does that mean?" "I don't know yet," smiled slightly. "I hope I don't have to find out." He left soon after, promising to show her around the academy the next day. sat alone in her room, holding her grandmother's bag in her lap. She traced the steel handle with her fingers, feeling the weight of it. Her grandmother had designed it herself, back when the streets of Seoul were not always safe for a woman walking alone. "It's just a bag," her grandmother had said once, winking. "Nothing special about it, nothing at all." Thought about the she had passed in the corridor. She thought about their laughter and their black eyes and their 4 strong arms. She thought about tired face and slumped shoulders. Through the window, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, Earth spun in its orbit, small and blue and very far away, had traveled further than any member of her family had ever gone. She had worked harder than anyone thought possible. She had earned her place here. She would not give it up easily. She opened her grandmother's journal and began to read. The pages were filled with diagrams of strikes and blocks, notes on pressure points and joint locks, observations about when to fight and when to wait. Her grandmother's voice seemed to whisper from every page. "Remember, little one, the body is a weapon, but the mind is the hand that wields it." Read until her eyes grew heavy, then placed the journal carefully back in the bag. She lay down on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would attend her first classes. She would meet her teachers and her fellow students. She would smile and be polite and do everything right. But tonight, alone in the dark, she made a promise to herself. She had not come all this way to be broken. She had not carried her grandmother's bag across the galaxy to watch it be trampled in the dust. Whatever came next, she would be ready. The stars watched through the window as Park closed her eyes and slept, her grandmother's bag resting at her side like a faithful guard. 3 weeks passed on Station Horizon 7 and learned the rhythm of survival. She woke early every morning before the corridors filled with students. She ate her meals quickly, in corners where she would not be noticed. She attended her classes, answered questions when asked, and kept her eyes on her work. She did everything had told her to do. It was not enough. They found her anyway. Their leader was named, and he was larger than the others, with shoulders like mountain ridges and arms thick as tree trunks. His shell was darker than most, almost black, and his eyes held a cruelty that seemed to bring him joy. The first time he noticed, she was walking to her physics class. He stepped into her path, forcing her to stop. His followers gathered behind him, 4 other and several aliens from other species who had learned that staying close to power meant staying safe. "A human," said the translator, turning his growling voice into flat words. "I thought we had cleaned all the dirt from this station." Said nothing. She stepped around him and kept walking. Behind her she heard him laugh. "It doesn't speak. Maybe it's too stupid to understand." She kept walking. The harassment grew worse each day. Her assignments began to disappear from the Academy's computer system. When she reported the problem, the administrator, a thin creature with skin, simply shrugged and told her to be more careful. Her food was knocked from her hands in the meal hall 3 times in 1 week, always by someone who claimed it was an accident. Her clothes were found torn in her storage unit, though her door had been locked. Through it all, did not cry, she did not complain, she did not react. This was not what expected. In the dominance culture, weakness was shown through submission. When a lesser being was challenged, they were supposed to bend. They were supposed to kneel and apologize and accept their place in the order of things. This was how they had maintained their power for 3 centuries. Every other species had learned to bow. But did not bow. She simply picked up her things, cleaned the food from her clothes, rewrote her missing assignments, and continued with her day. Her face remained calm. Her eyes remained steady. She gave nothing. This made him angry. Notice the change in his behavior. "He's getting frustrated," he told one evening as they sat in her small room. "That's dangerous. When a feels challenged, they escalate." "I'm not challenging him," said. "I'm just existing." To him, that's the same thing. His face was pale. "Maybe you should transfer to a different station. There are other academies, places where they don't have so much power. Looked at her grandmother's bag hanging on a hook by the door. If I run now, I'll run forever. Some things you have to face. This isn't a lesson about courage, said, his voice rising. This is about survival. These people have broken everyone who came before you. They will break you too. Was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my grandmother faced worse. During the hard years in Korea, when food was scarce and the streets were dangerous, she walked through it all with her head high. She taught me that you cannot control what others do to you. You can only control who you are when they do it. Did not know what to say to this. He left soon after, his shoulders slumped with worry. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Was walking through the main atrium, the largest open space in the academy. Hundreds of students from dozens of species moved through the area, talking and laughing and going about their lives. Sunlight streamed through the massive windows, making the metal floors shine like mirrors. Was waiting for her. He stood in the center of the atrium with his followers arranged behind him. When appeared, he called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. Human, come here. Stopped, she could feel eyes turning toward her from every direction. The noise of the atrium faded as students paused to watch. She could walk away. She could pretend she had not heard. She could run to her room and lock the door. Instead, she walked toward him. She stopped 3 meters away, her bag hanging at her side. Looked down at her, his black eyes gleaming. Kneel, he said. The word hung in the air. Around them, students held their breath. Kneel, repeated, and apologize for contaminating this academy with your presence. Your species is primitive. You do not belong here. Admit it, and maybe I will leave you alone. Looked up at him. He was so much larger than her, so much stronger. His 4 arms could break her in half without effort. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to submit, to survive, to do whatever it took to escape this moment. No, she said. Her voice was calm, polite but firm. His face twisted. In 300 years, he had never heard that word from a species beneath him. He reached down and grabbed her bag, ripping it from her shoulder with such force that the strap tore. He threw it to the ground and stomped on it with his massive foot. The old leather split. The contents spilled across the shining floor. Her grandmother's journal slid across the metal, pages fluttering open. Primitive garbage, sneered, grinding his foot down, from a primitive species. Looked at the journal on the floor. She looked at the torn bag, the broken strap, the scattered contents of her life. She looked at 3 generations of her family's history crushed beneath an alien foot. Something changed in her eyes. Was watching from across the atrium. He saw his posture shift, saw her weight settle into her feet, saw her hands relax at her sides. He recognized what he was seeing because his own grandmother had taught him the same thing. It was the stance of a fighter. Did not notice. He was too busy enjoying his victory. He reached down toward the journal, meaning to tear it apart completely. He never got the chance. What happened next took exactly 4 seconds. His lower right arm reached toward the journal on the floor. His body was bent forward. His weight shifted. His attention focused on the small book that meant nothing to him and everything to the human standing before him. Moved. She did not charge at him. She did not scream or cry or beg. She simply moved, with the kind of speed that comes from 30,000 hours of practice, from a lifetime of training that began when she was barely old enough to walk. Her grandmother had taught her that strength was not about size. It was about leverage. It was about knowing where the body was weak and where it was strong. It was about turning an enemy's power against them. They were large. They were strong. Their 4 arms made them fearsome warriors, capable of attacking from multiple angles at once. But their joints, protected by that hard shell, were not designed to bend in certain directions. And when you had 4 arms, it was hard to protect them all. Caught's reaching arm at the wrist. She stepped inside his guard. her small body sliding past his other arms before they could react. She twisted her hips and pulled, using his own momentum to guide his arm into a position it was never meant to go. Then she brought her grandmother's bag up from the floor. The steel handle, wrapped in old fabric, cracked across his primary elbow joint with the full force of her body behind it. The sound was sharp and clear, like a branch breaking in winter. Shell, so hard and proud, shattered at the joint. He screamed. The sound filled the atrium, echoing off the high ceiling and metal walls. It was not a sound the students had ever heard before. They did not scream. They did not fall. They did not lose. But was on his knees now, his broken arm hanging useless at his side, his black eyes wide with shock and pain. Stood over him, her grandmother's bag in her hand, her breathing steady and calm. The atrium was completely silent. Hundreds of students stood frozen, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. In 300 years, no species had successfully defeated AI in combat. It was simply not possible. They were warriors. They were the top of the food chain. They were unbeatable. And yet, followers stared at their leader on the ground. They looked at the small human woman who had put him there. They did not move. They did not know what to do. Their entire understanding of the universe had just been shattered along with his arm. Knelt and picked up her grandmother's journal. She brushed the dust from its pages, checking for damage. The paper was old but strong. It had survived. She placed it carefully back in her torn bag. Then she stood and waited. Security arrived within minutes. They were a mixed group, several species working together, their faces showing the same shock as everyone else. They looked on the ground, looked at standing calmly beside him, looked at the hundreds of witnesses surrounding them. "What happened here?" the lead officer asked. Before could answer, a voice came from above. The station's AI, a neutral intelligence that monitored all public areas, spoke through the atrium speakers. "I have recorded the entire incident. The student initiated contact by destroying personal property belonging to the human student. The human responded in self-defense when they reached toward her again. All actions were reactive, not aggressive." The security officers exchanged glances. This was not a situation they had ever trained for. "The human will come with us for questioning," the lead officer finally said. "They will be taken to medical." Nodded. She did not resist as they led her away. But she kept her grandmother's bag clutched tight against her chest, the steel handle still warm from impact. As she left the atrium, she passed. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, his mouth open, his eyes shining with something that might have been tears or might have been wonder. He whispered. She paused just long enough to meet his eyes. "Some storms," she said quietly, "require you to become the wind." Then she was gone, surrounded by security officers, walking with her head high through the corridors of Station Horizon 7. Behind her, the crowd finally began to move again. Students turned to each other, speaking in hushed voices in a dozen different languages. The news was already spreading, racing through the station's networks faster than light. A human had defeated a small, soft, primitive human had broken the arm of one of the most powerful warriors in the galaxy. Everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. In the medical bay, doctors worked on shattered joint. The damage was severe. The shell would heal, but the arm would never be as strong as it once was. He would carry this defeat in his body for the rest of his life. In the security office, sat in a small chair and answered questions calmly. Yes, she had trained in martial arts. No, she did not have any cybernetic enhancements. No, she had not planned the attack. Yes, she would do it again if necessary. The officers did not know what to charge her with. Self-defense was legal. Property destruction had been committed by, not her. Fighting was against Academy rules, but so was harassment, and the AI's records showed weeks of documented abuse. They let her go with a warning to appear at a disciplinary hearing the following week. Walked back to her room alone. The corridors were strangely empty. Word had spread and students were avoiding her, unsure whether to fear her or admire her. She did not care either way. In her room, she sat on her bed and opened her grandmother's journal. She turned to a page near the back, where her grandmother had written a final note before she died. Tamai, you are stronger than you know. You are braver than you believe. When the world tries to crush you, remember that you are not alone. I am with you. I will always be with you. Now go and show them what we are made of. Closed the journal and held it against her heart. Outside her window, the stars burned on, cold and eternal. But something had changed in the galaxy that day. Something small and human and unbreakable. The wind had begun to blow. The disciplinary hearing was held in the Academy's grand chamber, a circular room with seats rising in tiers like an ancient arena. It was designed to hold 300 beings, and on the day of hearing, every seat was full. Word had spread far beyond Station Horizon 7. The video of the fight, captured by the station's AI, had been shared across the galactic network. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds had watched a small human woman break the arm of a warrior. It was the most viewed recording in decades. Sat alone at a small table in the center of the chamber. Her grandmother's bag, now carefully repaired with new stitching, rested at her feet. She wore simple clothes and kept her hands folded on the table. Her face was calm. On one side of the chamber sat the delegation. There were 12 of them, all wearing the formal robes of their government. Their leader, an ancient with a shell turned by age, spoke first. "This human attacked one of our citizens without provocation," he declared, his voice booming through the chamber. "She used illegal combat modifications to gain an unfair advantage. She must be expelled from this academy and imprisoned for assault." The chamber buzzed with whispers, did not react. The Academy's chief administrator, a tall being with silver skin and 6 eyes, raised a hand for silence. "The human will be examined by our medical staff to verify whether any modifications exist." The examination took only minutes. Scanners passed over his body, measuring every bone and muscle and nerve. The results appeared on a large screen for everyone to see. No modifications, no enhancements, no technology of any kind. Just a human body, trained to its natural limits. The delegation erupted in protest. "Impossible," their leader shouted. "No primitive species could defeat a warrior without assistance." "And yet," the administrator said quietly, "the evidence says otherwise." The hearing continued. The station's AI presented its recordings, not just of the fight but of the weeks leading up to it. The chamber watched as and his followers harassed day after day. They watched food being knocked from her hands. They watched her belongings being destroyed. They watched demand that she kneel. When the recordings ended, the chamber was silent. Stood up, he had been sitting in the public gallery, watching and waiting. Now he walked down to the center of the chamber, his hands shaking but his voice steady. "I request permission to testify," he said. The administrator nodded. Turned to face the crowd. "I have been a student here for 2 years. I am human-like, and I have experienced the same treatment she has, the same harassment, the same abuse, the same destruction of my property and my dignity." He paused, gathering his courage. "I never fought back. I was too afraid. I thought if I kept my head down, if I stayed quiet, if I made myself small enough, they would eventually leave me alone. But they never did. They just kept pushing, kept taking, kept breaking me piece by piece." His voice grew stronger. "Did what I was too scared to do. She stood up, and now you want to punish her for refusing to be broken." Other voices began to rise from the gallery. A student stood, her healing wing still wrapped in medical tape. "Broke my wing last year. I reported it. Nothing was done." A student stood next. "My research was stolen and given to students. When I complained, I was told there was no evidence. One by one, students from a dozen different species stood and shared their stories. The dam had broken. Years of silence and fear poured out into the chamber, a flood of testimony that could not be ignored. The delegation grew quiet. Their ancient leader's face was unreadable, but his 4 hands gripped the table in front of him hard enough to crack the surface. When the testimony finally ended, the administrator spoke. This hearing was meant to determine whether Park should be punished for her actions. Instead, it has revealed a pattern of abuse that has been allowed to continue for far too long. The administrator's 6 eyes swept across the chamber. Is expelled from this academy, effective immediately. 3 faculty members who enabled or ignored this behavior will be dismissed. A full review of academy policies will begin tomorrow. The leader rose to his feet. This is an insult to our entire species. We will not accept. You will accept, the administrator said, and there was steel in the voice now, or you will leave. The Galactic Integration Academy exists to educate all species equally. If they cannot participate in that mission with honor, then perhaps they should find elsewhere to send their students. For a long moment the chamber held its breath. The delegation stood frozen, facing a choice that their culture had no framework for. Submit or leave, bend or break. They left. The chamber erupted in noise as they swept out, their robes trailing behind them, but did not watch them go. She was looking at something else. An elderly professor was making his way toward her through the crowd. His feathers were white with age, and he moved slowly, but his eyes were bright and sharp. "Young human," he said, stopping before her table. "I have taught at this academy for 60 years. I have seen many students come and go. I have watched them dominate and bully and break spirits for longer than you have been alive." He reached out and touched her shoulder with a gentle wing. "We thought humans were fragile. We saw your soft skin and your small bodies and your short, and we thought you were weak. We were measuring the wrong things." Looked up at him. What should you have been measuring? The old professor smiled. Heart, will, the refusal to stay down when you have every reason to fall. These things cannot be seen on a scanner, but they are more powerful than any weapon in the galaxy. He turned and walked away, leaving alone in the center of the chamber. But she was not really alone, was pushing through the crowd toward her. Other students followed, beings of all shapes and sizes who had found their courage that day. They gathered around her, not with worship but with something more valuable. Respect. Outside the grand chamber, news was spreading across the galaxy. The video of fight had been powerful, but the video of the hearing, of student after student standing to share their truth, was even more so. On Earth, humans watched and felt something stir in their chests. Pride, hope, the knowledge that one of their own had faced the galaxy's bullies and refused to kneel. In her small room that night, held her grandmother's journal and cried for the first time since arriving on the station. Not from sadness, but from relief. The weight she had been carrying for weeks finally lifted from her shoulders. She had not just survived, she had changed something. The wind was still blowing, and it was getting stronger. 6 months had passed since the hearing, and Station Horizon 7 was a different place. Walked through the main atrium on a bright morning, her grandmother's bag hanging at her side as always. The leather had new scars now, stitched together with thread from 12 different worlds, each repair made by a different friend. She thought her grandmother would have liked that. Students nodded to her as she passed. Some called out greetings. A young with bright blue feathers waved from across the hall. A pair of students, their scales shining in the artificial sunlight, smiled and made room for her to pass. They were gone. After the hearing, their government had withdrawn all students from the academy. They had released angry statements about discrimination and unfair treatment. They had threatened consequences. But the consequences never came. Other species, watching closely, had seen something new. They had seen that they could be challenged. that their dominance was not natural law, but simply the result of everyone else being too afraid to push back. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted just slightly, just enough. Made her way to Training Room 7, a large space that had once been used only by students. Now it belonged to her. Inside, 30 students were waiting. They came from 7 different species, all of them smaller or weaker or softer than the galaxy's warriors. All of them had stories likes. All of them had been told they were not enough. Stood at the front of the room, wearing workout clothes and a smile that would have been impossible 6 months ago. He had grown in these past months, not taller, but he no longer walked with his shoulders hunched. He no longer avoided eye contact. He had become her assistant instructor, and he was good at it. "Everyone's here," he said as entered. She set her bag by the wall and turned to face the class. "Today we work on joint locks," she said. "The techniques I'm going to show you don't require strength. They require precision. They require practice. They require patience." The students arranged themselves on the training mats, moved among them, adjusting postures and demonstrating techniques. She taught them what her grandmother had taught her, the knowledge that had been passed down through 3 generations of her family. But she taught them something else too. She taught them that they had value, that their bodies, whatever shape or size, were capable of more than they believed, that the first step in defending yourself was believing you deserved to be defended. After the class ended, sat with in the corner of the training room. They shared water and watched the students file out, talking excitedly among themselves. "Do you remember what you told me when I first arrived?" asked. "Laugh softly. I told you to keep your head down, to survive, to run. You were trying to protect me." "I was scared," he said. "I had been scared for so long that I forgot there was any other way to live." He looked at her. "You reminded me." Through the training room window, they could see the stars. Earth was out there somewhere, small and blue and very far away, but it felt closer now than it ever had. "The new intake arrives tomorrow," said. 23 new students, 5 of them are human." Nodded. 6 months ago, no humans had applied to the academy. Now the waiting list was longer than any other species. Something had changed in the way humans saw themselves, and in the way the galaxy saw humans. She thought about the old professor and what he had said about measuring the wrong things. Humans were small. They were soft. They lived short lives and bruised easily and had only 2 arms. But they also refused to stay down. The next morning, stood in the arrivals area with a group of students from her class. They watched the shuttle doors open, watched new students step onto the station for the first time. A young human woman walked through the crowd, looking around with wide eyes. She was alone, carrying a single bag, her face showing the same mix of hope and fear that remembered feeling 6 months ago. Stepped forward, the group followed. "Welcome to the academy," said, offering her hand. "I'm this is, and these are your friends." The young woman looked at the diverse group surrounding her, aliens and humans standing together. "Friends. Nobody walks alone here anymore," said. "Not if we can help it." The young woman's eyes fell on its bag, on the repaired leather and the steel handle visible beneath worn fabric. Her eyes widened. "Is that the bag, the one from the video?" Smiled. "Family heirloom. Want me to teach you how to use one?" The young woman laughed, and some of the fear faded from her face. She took his hand. Together, the group walked into the station. Around them, students of every species went about their lives. Some nodded in greeting. Some pretended not to notice. A few still whispered and pointed. But nobody blocked their path. Nobody demanded that they kneel. Nobody told them they did not belong. In her bag, resting against her hip, his grandmother's journal held the wisdom of 3 generations. One day, she would pass it on. One day, another young woman would carry it across the stars and face challenges that could not imagine. But that was the future. For now, there was work to do. She had students to train, friends to support, a galaxy to show that humans were more than they appeared. Through the station's windows, the stars burned on, ancient and eternal. They had watched civilizations rise and fall. They had seen species come and go. They did not care about the small dramas of the beings who lived beneath their light. But beings cared, and sometimes one person who cared enough could change everything. She walked through the corridors of Station Horizon 7, her grandmother's bag at her side, her friends around her, her head held high. The storm had passed, but the wind remained. And it was blowing in a new direction.